Welcome, friends, and welcome to yet another session of NITCO Talks. We have again 4 fantastic designers, architects with us, and we are looking forward to seeing what they will be presenting to us. We're looking forward to interacting with them and looking forward to a great session. Let me first do the introduction. Ravindra Kumar heads design as the director at Banquet Associates. His strength has been providing innovative design solutions to emerging projects in Asia. He is also the founder principal of Pragroup, a research lab and an architectural studio that has pioneered in rigorous, sustainable approach to design. Ravi was nominated as a brand ambassador for sustainability initiatives towards green architecture, namely Earth Matters, Activism, Architecture and Design Quest India. Welcome, Ravi.
Thank you.
Poonam Mehta. Poonam's phenomenal designing sense and Akash's exceptional expertise in lighting design resulted in the inception of AM/PM Designs. It was incubated with a purpose to create structures which are a blend of imagination, creativity, and ethereal designs. Within a short span, AM/PM Designs has come to be recognized as an acclaimed design firm that combines sensitivity and professionalism to deliver awe-inspiring designs and space solutions. Welcome, Poonam.
Thank you.
Ashmit Alag. Ashmit did his initial design studies from the Parsons School of Design in New York and the Art Institute of Seattle in Washington. He was honored on the Wall of Fame by Art Institute of Seattle for his contribution on visual merchandising and was put on the list of top 40 retail designers under the age of 40 internationally by Global Shop. Timeless is often synonymous with luxury. His aim is to create a sense of elegance and sophistication whilst remaining practical and functional. In India, his studio Transform has created a strong niche for itself by designing more than 100 personalized residences and over 200 retail stores. Welcome, Ashmit.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, all.
Hiren A. Gandhi. Hiren is an architect, planner, and alumni of School of Architecture and School of Planning, CEPT, Ahmedabad. In the past 40 years, his firm, MS Hiren A. Gandhi and Associate, has designed many prestigious public buildings ranging from high-end laboratories, office buildings, sports complexes, commercial and religious campuses, memorials, hotels, and housing. He is a recipient of the Indian Institute of Architects Excellence in Urban Architecture Award and the HUDCO Award for low-cost housing. His philosophy has always been to create quality spaces and give innovative and cost-effective solutions within the constraints of the project's brief. Welcome, Hiren.
Thank you. Yeah.
This is truly a very impressive panel. The first question to Poonam. What does timeless design mean to you?
Timeless design to me, it's simply understanding the design that it is virtually perceived and it should be appreciated time and time. Whatever we create today, there is any project comes with so much of investment of time of the past and the future. So whatever that we're designing has to have like I think a resonance of a period that we're looking at. Any project, at least when we're doing a home, we're looking at we're working with a family of at least 3 to 4 generations, sometimes 4 generations if we're lucky. So what really we try and do is the space has to kind of talk to, I think, all the generations. It should kind of resonate with everybody. So this itself, the meaning of that is timeless to me.
In fact, this was the first time I got a comment from Rahul Kadri when we sent the messages out with what with our topic for today, and Rahul said he worked with Christopher Alexander.
My
That
God.
was amazing. I wish we had known that, and we would have insisted he came on the panel today.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. Ravi, what do you think is the meaning of timeless design to you?
I think today, for a present time, we need to sort of venture the architecture into a certain idea of mysticism, into agnostics, sort of nature of creativity. It must incorporate in us the joy of needs and habits in such a way that it will create the possibility to enable the architecture to our lives, to enable both the real, shape what we think is folk, shape what is culture, and also be profound. So for us, we are in a process of time which is not very ingrained in a strong sort of framed out culture. You can connect to a person who is sitting on the other side of the earth within seconds. You can fly the whole planet in a couple of weeks. And, the possibilities of collaborating and working together as relationship has expanded. So the politics of the architecture and the ideation of economy, driven possibilities of architecture has changed. So therefore, we have to create a fabric, a typology which is timeless.
Ashmin, would you like to add something here?
I think timeless is something which is, sans trend. It is never in vogue. It is never out. It is to do with a lot of heritage. It's to do with culture, and it allows you to breathe and it allows you to evolve, without re-looking at it. It's neither a hindrance, but it just forms a complete support throughout. At the same time, I believe it's very environmental friendly because it's without trends. You don't need to do something and then undo and then catch up with the fad at all times. So it, of course, becomes very environmental friendly. But anything which helps you prosper, anything which minimizes your housekeeping, if I talk about from an interiors point of view, any kind of design where if you want, you can change it, but you don't need to change it, that would be timeless.
You teach, I believe, Ashmit, does timeless figure in the teachings?
Oh, absolutely, sir. If there are two things that I believe in terms of interior, it's that spaces should be happy and spaces should be timeless. So rather than writing that do not print paper and save trees, I'm saying save trees by not needing to do paneling again and again. Do it for once, invest once, do it well, and becomes timeless. It serves you for a significantly longer period of time. Yeah, I think it's like a pant and a jacket. It's never in fashion. It's never guaranteed, never out of fashion. It just stays forever.
Hiren bhai.
See, according to me, timeless design is something which appeals to the generations beyond the period during which it was constructed or erected. So it has been done for, all architecture which we are doing is with the present socio-economic conditions, So what was created, which still remains relevant today or which still appeals today, is what is timelessness. And second thing is, I think the architecture design, which is in harmony with nature, grows with nature. And that has the timeless qualities. And that I feel what we call as the Shashwat, because our connection with the five elements, the Panch Mahabhuta, as we say, if those elements are woven into the design, it appeals, its appeal will be eternal. Like we see still some old buildings, we go to the courtyards there. It is so beautiful, we look at the sky through those courtyards, or we look the big trees maybe in those courtyards. So that appeal is eternal, So that is what I feel is timelessness in terms of architecture.
No, but it's true, when we walk into these old structures, old buildings, the feeling that we get is that why don't we build like this today? And
yeah, I think that's true. When you're looking at all these old, beautiful palaces or architecture, there is something that makes you just feel so special. that I feel that feeling is there. There is some kind of structure, the way they built it, that is so beautiful that I think it feels so timeless. And that I think we are all striving as designers to kind of create some spaces that eventually make history, or at least kind of resonate for years to come.
And the thing is, howsoever, whatever technological tools which we may have, but with our connection with the elements of nature, that is eternal, you know. So, I mean, they say that people go to Las Vegas and you have this artificially created skies and you have thunderstorm and all this. After a while, you feel bored, you just feel like coming out, you know, and you want to look at the real sky. So, whatever you may simulate, but your connection with nature is something, you know, you look at water, we look at, stars, there's nothing comparable, you know, in terms of whatever we may create, you know, in terms of the human objects.
I think one of the problems is the municipal laws. You know, they don't permit, like in Mumbai now, doesn't permit balconies. Then we don't, and the FSI has become so expensive with all the premiums that they don't allow, that nobody wants to build those passages, those long winding passages that add so much to the beauty of a house, thick walls, because that again adds to the beauty. I think it's just that urbanization has made us go in what they call a modern direction, and it's not allowing it to be timeless.
And actually, for that, incentives should be given to the. I remember, I don't know now whether in Delhi there still that continues or not. Double-height terraces, double-height balconies were free in FIR. So people were encouraged to give double-height balconies, you know, to the apartments. So this
in Mumbai
now,
balconies are part of FSI. So
even so in Ahmedabad.
Oh.
Yes. And on the contrary, they always read this way that, okay, you have given double height, so the other fellow will collaborate with you and he will put another floor, you know, in between. So if you look at it this way, then nothing can happen, you know. You suspect everybody.
Yeah, we start with the range of doubt. Let's find out he must be a thief, you know. So you need to do everything to become this new thief.
Exactly.
We start negative.
But in this lockdown period, people have. I mean, everybody, whosoever comes after we have opened, they say we at least want something open. You know, even in the low-cost housing, everybody wants now a balcony. You know, which is, I think, very essential in our condition.
I think the lockdown has made everybody feel the importance of home itself.
Yes.
Everyone wants a really nice home and well-designed, well-equipped. So I think that's the essence of luxury suddenly.
And timeless, so that you don't get bored out of it, even if you're sitting for three months altogether. Yeah. I believe that's the fundamental difference between contemporary and classic or timeless. You know, I feel that in a lot of universities, once we talk about contemporary, we say, okay, contemporary is probably a nicer word to temporary. You know, it's to do with the trend, it's to do with fashion, it's to do with in and out. It's constantly in a race. And whatever you have now will probably be outdated in 2 or 3 years. So it would never be timeless. Yeah, I find contemporary to be, good to date, not to marry. Timeless, you should marry.
No, but the thing is, even within the contemporary architecture, you can bring in these timeless elements. No?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Courtyard is a timeless element. You have verandas. You can have double-height terraces. You can bring in all these elements.
Yeah. Or details. The moment you start detailing out.
Actually. In fact, that way I feel that when even British built in the colonial era, probably they were quite conscious, because see, most of these, even these circuit houses that we see, or the old bungalows, they are always had a deep veranda all around, you know. So they kept the house cool. So I think they, even though they were outsiders, you know, they were conscious about the climatic conditions here. So I think that is eternal.
Okay, question for Ravi now. How does timeless design resonate with our ever-evolving lifestyle?
You know, for me, the idea of timelessness is more connection to the intrinsic nature of the idea of design. I'll just repeat myself. The point is that when you look at a chair or when you look at a bed, there are certain basic fundamentals, principles that govern the joy of experience of a chair or a bed. So in a design process or a program, we must create that joy as an accurate sense of place. Timelessness does not necessarily mean bracketing oneself into a style bracket. For example, if you look at Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, it has a certain quality of architecture and experience and the joy of moving and appearing and disappearing in that space, that it will remain so for 1,000 years. If you go into, for example, the architecture of the Guggenheim, that is, Frank Lloyd Wright, there is a certain experience that you will enjoy, which has a certain quality of timelessness. It is contextual, it is climatic, it belongs to a time that it was built, but it survives the experience of placemaking. I think one of the most beautiful sort of addition of literature that Christopher Alexander got was called as pattern language, where, he imbibes the idea of timeless way of building to a fact-finding mechanism, where, how does a stair become a sense of place? How does your living vestibule or living space or a dining space bring in a certain sense of mystical enchantment forever? I think that is what is important. It's not about whether it is modern, contemporary, tropical modern, classical. I don't think the question of that appears. So therefore, for me, the sense of timelessness is in the true epistemology of the idea. So that creates the connect. And all of us as architects strive to create that sort of invincible experience which makes you immortal. I think that's what some of the great masters or architects of certain ability have demonstrated. When you look at Aravena's fundamentals, the buildings that he designed in the large housing project, it's that experience of completeness that makes that man invincible and perfect in his architecture. Whereas when you look at some other architects, let's take, for example, me, if I've done a whole campus of Infused and done the interiors, it might not have that sense of timelessness for some reason, because I might have failed to create that connect of, immortality in that experience of wanting to be in that space. So therefore, that is the connect of timelessness.
But do clients appreciate architecture that would be traditional or timeless, or do a lot of them want to go contemporary or modern? So then you have no choice left on what you have to do.
No, sometimes, if you look at a girl, she might want to wear all the jewelry that she has, and it will only make her look extremely nourish and ugly. But sometimes the designer will have to dress her up right. Not that she knows it. There is a certain comfort that she must enjoy in being dressed like that. So that's what an architect's role is. Sometimes we have to become that third person. If you ask, if you're doing a simple home, maybe the housewife has collected so many souvenirs all over from different parts of the world. If you stack it all up in the living room, it'll look kitsch. So you have to program that method of making them think that this is what they want, not think, work with them to realize. So therefore, that's what an architect's endeavor would be. So I would fail to disagree that we will sort of thaw them and then dictate. We have to be with them, to make them come to the joy of orgasm.
That's Robbie. I could say that even without the video.
Can I say something in this?
Go ahead.
Yeah. See, you're saying that whether the clients agree to bring in, elements which are timeless, or So, like Ravi said, it has nothing to do with whether it is colonial architecture or whether it is contemporary or whether it is a traditional, with the Hindu architecture principles. It is how you have treated that material and how you have made that space. It is the whole idea of space making actually, and which gives that flip, which gives that quality to that space actually. I can make a courtyard, but how a courtyard is made, what is the layout of the courtyard, what is the landscape within it, or how. So, I mean, the quality of and to bring in the timelessness element, it doesn't cost actually anything extra. It is how much sensitive you are. And I have put a few slides which I feel in the state of Gujarat, I feel that those are the architecture I've always admired, and it has got some timelessness quality. And it is from a simple mud, mud bungas to the contemporary concrete. So, I mean, timelessness, it has not to do with and I'm sure that the client doesn't mind it, but you have to, of course, you have to have some leverage in terms of, certain elements, or it is not just to be utilizing every inch, in only, because like in Christopher's book also, there are many spaces, which are not named, but those spaces are great spaces actually. It is a particular name or that is not given to that space, but that is perhaps the best space in that, that particular structure.
I completely agree with Hirenji about the quality of the space. I think that is the ultimate solution to whatever style design we're talking. I think it's the quality of materials that we choose, the quality of the space on a whole. That is what will, that for me is probably timeless. That's a main fundamental of timeless, how you detail it, and all of that is probably that will make it last and kind of look presentable for a time to come.
It's the consistent relevance and emotional experience that a timeless thing. It has to, each time, every time, it has to evoke a very similar feel. That would become timeless, right? If we go to Europe and we see a church which is a defunct church, it's not even practiced as a church anymore. But the moment we enter in, we'll end up shutting up. Nobody is telling us to walk in a stride or speak at a lower volume, but we just land up giving in to the environment. And that design would become timeless, that irrespective if the function of the building remains the same or not, but it would evoke the same expression out of you. And I guess, I mean, you can use any material, but as you start adding minor details into it, that's the thing that keeps it interesting and make it more timeless.
Very true. So, what are some of the structures and spaces that have a timeless appeal in your opinion? Hiren bhai, maybe we can start with you. If you have those pictures, you said.
Yeah, I have collected a few pictures.
And also, what are the qualities in the structures or the spaces that you're showing that, according to you, make it timeless or give it that timeless character?
Yeah, so maybe along with the picture, I can say something, what I feel about it. And then even others can add on something to that. So how to share the screen, how to, I press on the share the screen.
Yeah,
Yes,
press on that green button.
And then I have to go to which way? After I've shared the screen, okay. Yeah, I open the PowerPoint. Yeah. Yeah, can everybody see?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we all being architects, everybody knows about what I'm showing. But we're just trying to, I mean, what is around me in the sense that I live in the state of Gujarat. And, this, everybody knows about these bungas we touch. And I think with timelessness, even the sustainable structures or the structures which are sustainable also has that timeless quality. So Bhungas of the Kutch, have circular structure having mud walls and thatched roof. They are known for their structural ability in earthquake and are climate responsive. It also protects against sandstorms and cyclonic winds. The cluster formation of Bhungas are also very interesting. So, and you can see this, I think this has some timeless quality, in terms of the wall paintings and the whole ambience, and this is the inside of it. And there are some other many with a very beautiful mud mirror work also inside. So this is with a simple material of mud and bamboo actually. Then these are the Buddhist caves at Kambalida. Again, rock cut Buddhist cave situated on a foot of small hillock on the banks of a spring. And when you are inside, you are almost, you feel as though you've gone in a trance or something. So that is a timeless quality inside, when you are inside the cave. And this, of course, everybody knows this is the Ranki Vow, which is a subterranean structure, and a simple task of fetching water has become a celebration, and a cool resting place. Same thing, Adalaj, which is just outside Ahmedabad. And this is the Modera Sun Temple, and the Kund situated on the bank of river Pushpavati. River is of course away, but the way water comes and the whole ritual, and you can see the entire rhythm, the shadow and light. I think very important in our all ancient architecture was also the play of the shadow and light, over the surfaces. And then this is the Siddhi Sayyad Jali, and what can be done in stone. This is the classic example and how light enters. This even with the latest machines, of this water jet and CNC and whatnot. This is a handwork done in stone, which is amazing. Actually. This is a timeless quality. Then this is Sarkej Rosa on the outskirts of Ahmedabad, which is a tomb and the complex, a tomb and the mosque. And again, here also, it is the timeless, the whole campus, it has the timeless quality. Whenever you go, you feel that you have gone into a different world actually. The patterns in the jalis are amazing. This is Champaner, which is again the scale and the proportion. This is the Sat Kaman in Champaner. This is the Vadnagar Toran, 40 feet high Toran. And you see, look at its majestic proportions, and the use of stone. This is a temple at Polo. Polo is a complex of temples situated in the jungle presently. And see the, treatment of the whole surface, and this is of course not at the moment. This picture is not showing the shadows, but the sun, when the sunlight falls, it creates amazing shadow patterns. So this is a kind of mystic also. It takes you in the other world actually, in the patterns of the jalis. Then these are the wooden havelis, which are there very much in Ahmedabad. This is the haveli in Vaso, which is Mahendra Desai Haveli. And this is the water harvesting within the courtyard with the tanka, which was used all throughout the year. The water which was, and you can see the small detailing of the, the pulley above actually, through which the water can be pulled actually. And this is the Hriday Kunj at Gandhi Ashram. And really, when you visit Hriday Kunj, actually, you feel that you have been in the presence of Mahatma Gandhi. And it is such a simple structure. It's a veranda, just a veranda where all the great leaders of the whole world have come over here, And the courtyard, a very simple courtyard where Gandhiji's room is there, And from here, we come to the modern architecture, which is the National Institute of Design, Miraben Sarabhai and Charles Eames, the grid planning and the varied spatial experiences, the courtyards, the amazing brick shells. So this has an eternal, appeal. Then we have SEP designed by Professor Vivi Doshi, which has, this load-bearing exposed brickwork construction and the amazing way the levels have been treated. And I think it is it is an appeal which will be for all the times to come. This is, of course, everybody knows the Louis Kahn Plaza and the monumentality and the way the brick has been used. And the amazing part is you get the same feeling when you visit Salt Lake Institute in San Diego. The way the plaza looks toward the Pacific Ocean, actually. And this is Corbusier's Millowners Association in Ahmedabad. And the response to this building to the hot, dry climate with these kinds of fins, it is amazing. And the way the greenery has been weaved inside, and those tall veranda, like there are no rooms actually, there are big open double height volumes, but they are so amazing actually. I mean, a structure which was, I think, built in somewhere between around 50s and 60s, it still has that same appeal when you go over there. You feel like going again and again to this place actually. So this is what is timelessness, according to me.
You can. That was amazing. Seeing. That was amazing, Hiren bhai. And I was thinking that these are structures of another era, and it was all done by hand, as you were saying. We now have all the CNC machines, all the water jet machine that can actually replicate this and do any of this work. But this was done at a time when it had to be done by hand. They had the inclination, they had the design sense and the inclination, and got
because there was also that kind of patronage. If you have heard of Mount Abu and the Delvara temples there, they say that when these Delvara temples were constructed on such a remote place on Mount Abu, they say that these Vastupa and Tejwan brothers who got it done, they were paying the laborers, in terms of the gold, in terms of the weight of the stone, waste material which was coming out. So that was the kind of patronage, which these craftsmen were encouraged actually, which all we have lost. So that also. And second thing which I wanted to say was that it is not the, we saw the range of materials, say from a very simple material like mud and bamboo to the exposed concrete. So it is any kind of material, but you can bring these qualities actually. And of course the stone.
Yeah, because we saw it's in stone, it's in wood.
Yeah.
I mean, but this because of the machines we have today, this can really all be replicated.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
which we earlier couldn't do.
Yes.
So sometimes when you do it with a machine, it just loses its soul. What makes it also timeless is the nuances, that just lands up putting a lot of soul into it. The little details, that just so sometimes if you make a thing with a machine, it could become very time centric. Usually,
I wanted to add one thing, that before some time we renovated this Reserve Bank of India's executive floor. And since Ahmedabad became a World Heritage City, we wanted to bring in something of the Ahmedabad heritage. And a portion of the Sarkhet Jali, which has been done, in stone itself, has been erected there. So, I mean, these things are possible, but with machines also. But of course, then there is a when it was done by hand, it also, I think it also sort of give employment, and it gave patronage to a lot of artisans. That is, I think, the.
So going back to what Ashmit was discussing a little bit earlier, what are the fundamentals of timeless design? Ravi, would you take that? What would you consider are the fundamentals?
To define that would be a super big challenge, because it's experiential. The word that we have to appropriately use is haptic. That means to say, when you go to a temple, for example, from the time that you enter the temple city, the main gate, to the point of time that you go to the shrine, there is a certain experience which collectively prepares you to be one with God. So, that whole experience is haptic. Now, that will be sort of regardless of the time at which you would do that, whether you did it in the 4th century or you do it in the 21st century or the 22nd century. It has an ingrained cultural connect and a certain experience that the human nature will connect. I mean, regardless whether you're agnostic, you're an atheist, you're a believer, all that doesn't matter. But the architecture can capture that. I think that is the aspect of that connect to the fundamental. It cannot be actually verbatized. You cannot put that into, a bullet list and say, you do this, then there's a win-win. But I think that's what makes an architect or an interior designer spectacular as an occupation, that we have a possibility, to draw that, to bring that in the architecture that we build. Which is why when you visit a couple of buildings in your life, whether they're modern or historic, they create an impression, a print in your mind that is everlasting. Hiren Gandhi was talking about the Salt Lake. When you go to that whole laboratory and stand in that courtyard, there is a certain geometry and accuracy that Khan has been able to achieve, and that only comes through a huge years and repetitive knowledge of practice and perseverance. And that's what, when you read Pablo Neruda, when he says, I want to do to you what the wind does to the cherry trees, he writes this to his girlfriend. I mean, it's such a beautiful paragraph, that it's simple words. It's not complicated lingoism. But it just makes that essence of experience so intense. So I think that is the connect of fundamental to the idea of timelessness, where the poetry or the music or the architecture or the sense of that experience will be forever alive and makes it timeless. It's not the nature of molding or ornate expression. I mean, you're absolutely accurate. Today, you have fantastic machines where you can probably replicate the Taj Mahal, but it does not mean that you're disconnecting with all the nature of labor, occupation, the Mughal sort of reign and his love to Mumtaz. All that is historical. But if you look at a fact possibility, yes, we can do. But the eye can, what Ashmit says, can differentiate the nature of those nuances which is handcrafted to machine made. There is a certain quality that you cannot define in words. It's like, a guy who has been looking at art continuously, if he walks in and looks at Abhinendranath Tagore's sketch, will suddenly reverberate with appreciation. Whereas a person who does not understand art cannot become the judge of that quality, whether Abhinendranath Tagore is right or wrong. It's like, if you don't know French language, you cannot appreciate literature. If you don't know how to appreciate Western classical music, you might say, yeah, it hears good, but you will not be able to appreciate. So therefore, it is important for us to train the mind to hear and understand, to learn, to appreciate. That is the formative years of growth. But at some point of time, eureka happens. And then, then there is that super connect of timelessness. And there you find the origin of the fundamentals. And that is the root of accuracy.
That's very well explained, Ravi. That was fantastic. Poonam, what do you feel?
I think, as designers today, we are struggling with, creating, innovating, making something cool, making something fresh. But in the end, I just want to understand, is that making the end user happy? And is that really going to make the user and his generations happy? So I think that's the big question that comes. It's like a struggle that we're trying to do. Like, I think there was someone who asked, saying, people are asking for contemporary designs, and then what do? You can't just tell them, hey, no, that's not the way. I think it's not about just following contemporary or modern or anything. It's really about understanding the space, understanding the quality of materials that you're going to be using that will last and kind of give you that feeling that Ravi just said you can't explain, but it's that one feeling that you feel that, yeah, this is something that just feels timeless.
Do you want to add to this, Ashmit, again?
I'll add to where Ravi left. The interest part. Nothing is interesting if you're not interested. So if the guy has no sensibility towards a particular thing, then he would just be outright bored into it. While at the same time, I think when we talk about timeless, especially in terms of interiors, as long as it's functional, it's adapting, it will outlast. It'll evolve with you, and that will just purely make it timeless. That's probably a very scientific way of looking at it. At the same time, emotionally speaking, it has to be something which is ethereal. You cannot put it into words, because the moment you put it into words, it just becomes a commodity. It loses all its soul.
We're in the business of recreating timeless these days. We have all the machines. We recreate timeless. But I can't recreate the soul, as Ravi says.
True. True.
But what I feel is that we as designers, particularly architects, there is no formula that how you make something, which is extraordinary or which appeals to people for a very, 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 very long time to go on. But I think there are certain basic elements, One is the honesty for the material that you are using, It's like if you are using concrete, yes, the true expression of concrete is there. If you are using brick, if you are using wood. So I think the expression of the material or the being honest to that material, that is one. Second thing is, again, I'm repeating the same, that, we are made of the Panchamahabhuta. And, say, for example, the moment you know that the natural light is falling onto the wall, but you don't know the source from where it is coming. The moment you see that kind of a light coming into the building, and falling onto a wall, there is some element of curiosity created, and there is something which happens within you, So it's like, these elements of nature, if you are always working with that, maybe one day you will hit the right type of, which every architect dreams that you create something timeless, But that is the greatest challenge, actually.
But mysticism creates and retains
yes.
interest. Huh?
We have some audience questions that Anikaa will ask, and then after that we have Zubin in the audience. We would like him to come into the room to ask his question. Zubin, I hope you're ready with your question, because we want to hear what you say.
Okay, so we'll start with the first audience question. Does the method of construction determine or impact the timeless qualities of a space? Who would like to, anyone volunteering to take this?
I'll take it. Well, it certainly makes a difference. We just discussed that if you make it completely machine-made, it does lose its soul, because machine work is usually too accurate. And when something is too accurate, it's far from natural. Sometimes to cut down on the cost and the time, what we do, let's say if you have to make a jali work, if you have to make a trellis get work, you make it on the machine, but you finish it with hand. So it gets those undulances for the hand, and hence, trying to run towards that direction while saving money. But method absolutely has to do with it.
Imperfect is beautiful, no?
Perfect is unreal, isn't it?
Imperfect is beautiful.
No, they say no that when it was handmade, every artisan put something of his own, in the in those carvings outside the temple. Every artisan had his own interpretation, to some extent actually, and that was allowed.
Like the chop,
So
the Hindi word chop.
Yeah, that is a wonderful thing
chop
actually. Yes, yes.
Word like chic and shabby. So,
Okay, so the next one is slightly complicated. Is timeless an eye wash? Can it be programmed like music in the future, easily identify repetition and pattern in buildings, even when viewing it from an awkward angle? And such structured visual systems provide a sense of order which our eyes naturally recognize.
Can I take this?
Please.
I think the repetitive design or it is the visual element, that is not the only thing which brings timelessness. Let's be very clear. It is a total sensory perception. You smell it, you feel it, you walk through the place. Howsoever, whatever walkthrough we create, can that be replaced by even walking through the real, real place or real structure? So it is. To create a timelessness quality, I'm talking particularly about architecture actually, it is not that there is a formula or, that there is some repetitive element or some patterns that you generate that will bring in the timelessness quality. It is a combination of so many things. What is your scale? What is your proportion? How the natural light is coming? How whether that space is low, what is your transition, whether you are going from a lower volume to a higher volume, So there's nothing like this, that there is some element which you repeat or some pattern that you create, which will help attain a timelessness quality to a structure or to an architecture. It's a combination of several factors which I strongly feel that whether it is a totally uneducated person or whether a person who has traveled a lot or very educated person, there are some elements which appeal to all human beings, so it's not that, a person with a very high exposure, he will get the timelessness quality only through something, it is something which appeals to everybody actually, because we are made, with all these 5 elements.
It is.
So I hope I have answered.
Yes.
Okay, so our next question is from Zubin.
Yeah.
No, Poonam wanted to say something. No?
Oh, sorry, Poonam, you can.
No, it's okay. Let's invite Zubin.
So Zubin is in the room, but I'm going to read the question out for him.
Let him. No. Better he ask for it himself in his own.
Yeah, Anikaa, let me ask Anikaa. Okay, guys. First of all, congratulations. You'll have broken the bar on words that can be used in a webinar. Thanks to Ravi and Ashmit especially, I will never look at architecture the same way. So congratulations on that. And Hirenbhai and Poonam, it's lovely to hear your views on timelessness, and I love the presentation that Hirenbhai made. Amazing. I have a simple question. Do you all see the presence of an accurate formula to convince our clients to allow us to pursue our efforts in giving them a timeless ambience or sanctuary, let's say?
Can you repeat it? Can you repeat the question?
Do you see an do you see the presence of an accurate formula to convince your clients to allow us to pursue our efforts to give them a timeless ambience or a timeless sanctuary?
Can I attempt to answer? Yeah. Yeah. See, an accurate formula. See, ultimately, I feel that anything which is even if it's like this, that when something good comes up, people do appreciate actually. So basically, there is when people go to that place, they always come back, in whichever way they can describe that. बहुत अच्छा था वहाँ again जाने के लिए मन करता है, things like that, So the client, if it is, I think maybe if you talk of builder, let us say, and you are doing a complex, or a campus, and if you bring in some elements which is giving that extra flip to that whole space, and through some examples, if you can convince the client that there is not a set formula, but I think if it's a conscious client, because ultimately it is in the benefit of the whole project, If I'm sure in Bangalore IIM, which Ravi was talking, those pergolas, and those corridors, which are, maybe little extra it would have costed, but then it gives that that whole sense of being in a beautiful place. So the client will, I think, there's no set formula, but the client will agree if you really show him through the correct examples, and try to convince. I think, yeah.
Thank you.
Can I add to that?
I wanted to ask you, because I wanted to ask this body, because the mood was of the timeless architecture discussion. And I've always felt that there's no way that you can achieve this level of comfort from your clients unless you're a practitioner and you're a thorough purist, and your firm only puts out that type of project. So I always thought of it that way, but I was just looking for a formula that even people who have multiple clients, we're all commercially driven at some point, and we all have to put up modern, classical, contemporary, different sorts of interiors as the client would want it, being commercially driven eventually. So that was the reason I was asking for this formula. Ashmit.
I just wrote 5 points. Well, timeless is long lasting, of course. It's consistently enriching, low housekeeping, high on sophistication, and hence more bang for the buck. And I think the client would be pulled.
So basically the formula would be to convince your client that you're going to give him all these 5 elements in his interior.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The point about...
will you send me a message with all these 5 points?
So I only do timeless projects. And I think this kind of sums it up so easily that if they're getting maximum bang for the buck, it frees them out. They don't need to change things. If they want to, they can, but they don't need to. A big difference between a need and a want. Almost everybody gets them, irrespective of the price.
Can I add something to this? I wanted to ask this, in fact, to Ashmit and Poonam, that I always feel that if the architecturally the space is good, like you see Charles Correa's buildings, for example, if an architecturally the space is good, I think it requires minimal amount of interior, so to say, that it doesn't require any wall paneling, or it doesn't require false ceilings, things like that. So that kind of intervention is minimized if the architectural space itself is good. Do you agree?
I agree, and I feel that it's more of a responsibility, or it's a marry of architecture and interiors. When we take up if we're taking up a residence, for example, and the architect is built it, I think the point is to marry both from the inside and outside. You can't have something look very, very different, and then the outside is looking like another. Like, you can't have a classic structure and absolute modern interiors going on. There has to be some kind of a journey and a complete story that is going from the outside to inside. So I think, yes, say the architecture is so beautiful and they have these large windows and the power of natural light can play against using all these artificial architectural lights, why not? It really does add on to the experience from the inside.
I feel 50-50, because how the light is going to fall from the window and what is it going to fall on, and what would that thing look like. For instance, in summers we would hate to see velvet, but we would like to see jute and other thinner nubile fabrics, and vice versa. So when we do, for instance, an interior design project, we usually give the clients 3 sets of curtains, that for summers they should get into more like thin silks and raw silks and jute and this kind, while in winters they should go for velvets. And in monsoon, it should be more sheer fabrics, because Indians typically love rains or monsoon. And the same thing might not become appropriate in a different season altogether. It's like saying there is no harm in poetry or a joke, but it cannot be said at a funeral. So relevance of time and place becomes necessary when we talk about timelessness. There could be beautiful ballrooms, which are there in Europe all over. But if we get that design for a banquet hall in, let's say, Delhi, it might look great for a couple of years, but then it doesn't have that timelessness to itself, because it's not relevant in terms of the environment. So a lot would go when we talk about timelessness. One man's freedom fighter could actually be the other man's terrorist.
I think from the point what Zubin started, if you use a metaphor like music, for example, when a guy has practiced music to a certain period of time and you hear him play, you say, okay. But when a guy has done riyaz for a whole lifetime, like 40 years, 35 years, and he's really been a purist and concentrated on that work effort, and you hear the man play that music, regardless of the part of the nation that you come from or the culture that you belong to, you strike a chord in that purist's expression of that music, because it is the nature of his intrinsic way of expressing it. It becomes, it's like, bones and blood that he erupts when he sings. So for us, we've forgotten that pinch of architecture. We want the baby to be happening the moment chemistry happens in a test tube. We don't realize that it is an effort which is prolonged, which has a lot of, hard grain, work procedure that makes that invincible, accurate object get complete. I can't take a butter sheet and suddenly say I'll be Peter Zumthor, in the next 8 weeks that I do as my interiors. You cannot do that. You look at an Olivetti showroom done by Carlos Capa. It is, to react to Poonam's comment, it's in an architecture. It's like, in the Piazza San Marco, if you walk around, it belongs to a different time. The building completely belongs to a different time. And when Scapa did that particular interiors, it's absolutely accurate. Somebody wrote that I could experience cosmos in that space, because there was such perfection and effort to get the details right, to ask those materials how to format them to be what they are. And that is what differentiates between great architecture and good architecture. All of us can probably do, I can do, not all of us, I'll say, I'll exclude all of you. I can do maybe architecture. I don't know whether it's good or bad, but to go into that perfection of accuracy, as what Zubin mentioned, to get that, it's not 5, sort of bullets that you stick on your board and say, I'm going to tick all these and then the client is happy, as what Ashmit said. I think it's a life effort. And that's why you call some of them as great masters, as how they manage to achieve, not just through the work that they do, but the experience of life they lived, the reciprocations of every object of appreciation that they experienced, and formatted that and included that in that making. That's what makes that perfection and accuracy happen in making the object timelessness. So therefore, I think the journey of rigorous practice, Zubin, I think the journey of trying to be accurate, not that we will be accurate, trying to be super accurate, not to succumb, to the need of money or frame of time, or, you have to work around it. I'm not saying, you have to tell the client, get out of my office just because, we don't seem to mind to each other. We have to, we have to be conniving. We have to sort of work a route around to include him into that process that we want to do and hope to build the invincible.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for all of your inputs. I'm feeling quite enriched, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
You will hear from my accountant soon, Zubin.
All righty then.
Thank you, Zubin.
See y'all.
I even see Kanchan making a few comments. Kanchan, would you like to enter the room and ask question yourself?
Rahul, you can just unmute Kanchan.
Allow Kanchan into the room.
In the meantime, we have last couple of questions. I'll just move on to the next one. When clients ask for contemporary, how do we blend a timeless aspect with it? Anybody?
Well, if a client asks for a dal makhani, he doesn't need to know the entire recipe, does he? I mean, give him what he's looking for. And what is our job as designers truly is to be able to give them what they need. But at the same time, provide a lot of other things that they can't think of themselves because they're not professionals, which would include timelessness, which would include housekeeping, engineering, how long lasting it will be, and so many other things which they can't necessarily even understand, but they get to enrich it. Somebody put it very well. Early in my career, I heard that how a designer's job is. He was relating it to the movie industry, and he said the client is the producer because he's spending money. The client is the script writer because he's the one who is giving the brief. The actor are the people who are working, the laborers, the masons, because their work is visible. That's the actor. We are the directors, and our work is to bring out the best from the script, assign to which actor do we want to give what role. It's like choosing which vendor, which contractor, what application, what material do we have to apply there, and work absolutely silently behind the scenes to be able to bring out the best from all of that. And bringing out the best would also, of course, include the amount of time spent on the site and the amount of money spent on the site. Yet he gets something that he couldn't have got himself.
Can I say something? See, who says that contemporary cannot be timeless? Contemporary also can be timeless. I mean, it depends on, you saw some of the examples of the contemporary architecture, right? NID is a contemporary set, School of Architecture is contemporary, IM is contemporary, but they have got that timeless quality, So, I mean, again, it is like whether it is some old ancient building or colonial or contemporary, it is those elements which which makes it qualify for the timelessness. That's what. So contemporary has nothing to do with whether it is timeless or not.
Also, it's about, I think, pleasing the psychology of the universal eye. It's kind of, I think all humans have a certain kind of a behavior, and that behavior is kind of constant. I think a design should just serve that as a process, as a scheme. And when you have, for example, I think we are urged to kind of socially interact. That's just one type as an example to human behavior. So when you create spaces, it doesn't need to be like, it can completely be contemporary, modern, and yet look timeless. Have that feeling of timeless.
Okay, we have time for one last question. We've already exceeded 60 minutes. We're almost at 75 minutes. Anikaa.
Okay, so historically, marketplaces are an example of the combination of working and personal life. The supermarket typology of modern society is devoid of any social space and instead focused entirely on sales and revenue. Are architects not creating social human spaces anymore?
Yeah, I think we are looking at pieces of architecture of no such significance and recognizing that it is not possible. For example, if you look at some of the works of John Jerd, if you go to Fukuoka or, Roppongi in Japan, you will see some of the work done by Jerd architects where malls and large stores, incidental, these kind of hypermart kind of stores, which are experiential, which have become the new cultural hubs for, gathering people, for coming together, to be together, participate in a cultural sort of evaluatory kind of program. So it is possible. It doesn't have to mean that you have to be, in a great piazza and go from shop to shop, and then, or you have to be in a market square and look at vegetables the way a mandi works, and then read that as experience. You go to Barcelona, right annexed to the Torre Akbar, there is this huge market, the new marketplace that was designed by the Spanish architect, which is fantastic to recreate that experience of being in a market in a new method. So I think we need to requalify, I think, that semantics, that experience that we all live with, and to design them. So there are successful examples, but not that many. Unfortunately, the country creates 1,000 malls and they're all rut. So therefore we lose that connect, and we still want to go back to an old marketplace and then try and experience that sort of position. And unfortunately, we all tend to believe that architecture is like the mother of all art. We all love to pride that space. And if we recognize, if you read history, if you look at Kenneth Frampton's fantastic book called Critical History, you will recognize that, architecture has nothing to do with all the evolutions or the changes that have happened in the space of art. It's always been fine arts or performance art or literature. We all think, when you hear the word deconstructivism, we think it's all about architecture and Zaha Hadid. But if you go back and read your text, it is nothing to do with architecture. It was in literature that it happened. And it happened actually in the space of fine arts. And only after 3 decades, we sort of woke up and then wove ourselves to that parallel enigma and said, oh, there is something called deconstructivism or constructivism, or neoclassical or neocolonial kind of eras. So therefore, the typology of that change that we are experiencing no joy in going to a Walmart is because we have made them redundant and made it so connected to the joy of economy and not experience. But there are architects who have strained that, program and grown to make malls, a cultural sort of paradigm. So it is possible to recreate such paradise.
Can I add something to this? Yeah. I go to San Diego very often because my daughter stays there. And, there is, I don't remember the name of the mall, but there is one mall which is, where the entire central space is not air conditioned. They've just put those tensile structures at few places. And there are beautiful places for the children to play, some water bodies. It is such a lovely place compared to, you visit an air-conditioned mall. So, and people love to sit out. Of course, partly San Diego weather is very nice. But, I mean, even in these kind of things, ultimately, again, the same thing that you see a little bit of sky, you are not in a totally enclosed air-conditioned space. So, and I feel that people are more free over there, in terms of interacting with each other, socializing. So, like Ravi said, it depends on how an architect has created this whole space. And you then walk into an air-conditioned store. But the model is that the entire common area, which is there, which is a huge plaza and lot of things, that is all naturally ventilated. There's no air conditioning. And I think people love it.
It's also to do with the dynamic space and the static space. A completely enclosed building would be very static. If there's no people or no movement, which is artificially infused, it just becomes dead. While if some things are open to the environment and you can see the play of nature, you can see the play of light the way it is, it'll keep it dynamic and more interesting.
We have again our friend Vivek Gupta in the room, and he's going to ask the last question. Vivek, please unmute yourself.
So I'm saying, not the last question, I was just butting in by saying the question that hypermarkets today do not have play spaces or they're only selling points. I think hypermarkets in every city today have cafes, have bookstores, in fact have nurseries, most of them. I can tell you about hypermarkets in Delhi, Gurgaon, I'm sure in Bombay, Bangalore also. So I don't think that is happening. It only depends upon whether it is a kind of a cash and carry or it's a slightly luxurious space. So it will always depend on space. But this is wrong to state that today's hypermarkets, in fact, more than before, people are trying to engage the whole family. So if there are going to be smaller children, so there are bookstores, there are some toys and some gaming equipment lying. There are nurseries within, so you sell plants also. You have the bookstore, there are cafes, definitely. I mean, so I think we are in the right direction. I think more than anybody else, it's the market forces that determine how today's architecture is going to be. So if there is market force that says that you need to engage the whole family, we will, as architects, design spaces that are conducive to engagement of the entire family. Is that correct, Ravi?
I agree, Vivek. I think so. As an idea of typology, we must, reciprocate, demand, and make architecture fall into that bracket of what you are defining. I completely agree with you that there are places and it has to be sort of reformatted a little better. But my also aspirational connect is to become, to recognize, not become, to recognize a space as what Hans Hollein did. For example, when he built the India Pavilion in an expo, he actually put a golden canopy of the Taj. He formatted a little pavilion and he built a whole interior space for that expo for India. But if you look at the accuracy of that design and the amount of critique connect that one design did, it was fantastic. So I'm saying for all of us, I think as a typological nature to build, it's very important that these must be included of what you're saying, that when you go to a mall that, you must reformat the brief to include these possibilities in a very intrinsic way where the client might not even define this, but as architects, we are responsible to make sure that they're all there as important ideation. It's like, it's like walking through Xintiandi, and suddenly when one happened in Shanghai, China sprung up and did it in like 20 cities because it suddenly created a connect of people walking through a historical kind of a stage set. It's like a movie set, and then you eat your pinch of burger or grab a beer, and then, go to a comedy club. But, these are there for that time. But there are spaces, which will never die. Only for the reason that they have that quality of timelessness.
Right. Otherwise, I'd call them theatrical engagements, because that's theme malls, which is basically completely theatrical engagement. Somebody will have a ski resort, something, but timeless spaces, which are just spaces, which are architecturally articulated. They don't need any prop or anything like that. Those kind of spaces that thrive. So those are like more like the Bava kind of architecture or something like that, which is intrinsic to spatial enclosures. Doesn't need any prop. Good point. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Vivek, for coming in. Okay, guys, thank you so much. This was extremely engaging. It was really good. This was a great topic, Poonam. Thank you so much for initiating this topic. It was really good to, and I think we need to carry this on in person whenever all of you are visiting Mumbai, because all of you are from a different town. So it'll be wonderful.
Different state altogether, I guess. Wow.
Yeah, all different. Yeah, except Poonam and me are in the same state.
Gotcha. Well, thanks to you as well, for that matter.
Yeah, so whenever you guys are in Mumbai, you have an open invitation. Please inform me, and you have to come over, and we can carry on this very interesting conversation. I hope to see you Yes. And Ravi, hope to see a lot more of you because you speak so well. It's so fantastic to have you on.
Where I was sitting and making points from all the places he mentioned.
Thank you.
You know how thick Ravi's passport is? Ravi,
Oh.
how thick is your passport?
Yeah.
8 inches, 9 inches?
He must be really feeling terrible about the lockdown that you're not getting to travel.
Yeah, one day he landed with the immigration officer and he says, go.
Yeah.
And those pictures of Hiren Bhai were also fantastic. It was superb.
Yeah,
Thank you, Hiren Bhai, for showing us those wonderful structures.
Yeah, we enjoyed. Everybody enjoyed it.
It really enjoyed.
Thank you once again, all of you, and see you soon.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Vivek and Anikaa, for inviting us, and
Yeah,
thank
thank you.
Ashmit, Ravi, and Hiren.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks a
Great
lot for
meeting
coming
everyone.
on.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Indeed. Bye-bye.